So love in its highest form moves us to become philosophers in the true sense of a philosopher, of being lovers of wisdom. Right? This is what the term philosophy means. The first part of the word derives from philia, and the second part is Sophia, which means wisdom. So a philosopher is a lover of wisdom who is on his ascent upwards towards this ladder, towards glimpsing the beautiful. Hence, a true philosopher becomes one who contemplates on the highest truths and is in turn transformed in their virtues, in their actions, and also their understanding of reality. Right? They see beyond this world, beyond this Maya. Diotima says, and I quote, "And so Eros is necessarily a philosopher. And as a philosopher, he is in between being wise and being without understanding." And that is very important here. A philosopher is not somebody who claims that he has all the wisdom, but neither is a philosopher somebody who is ignorant or has no understanding. He's in between because he is constantly journeying upwards. What is love and what is wisdom? We've discussed the importance of love and of dying to yourself if you truly want to experience love. But love is not just a feeling, a sentiment that you have 1 minute and then it's gone the next minute, but an action, a way of life, a guiding principle in the wisdom tradition we've been exploring. So now we're looking at Plato's Symposium, where Socrates illuminates for us the nature of love and the pursuit of wisdom. Let's get into it. "And I shall let you go for now and turn to the speech about Eros that I once heard from a woman, Diotima of Mantinia. She was wise in these and many other things. When the Athenians once made a sacrifice before the plague, she caused the onset of the disease to be delayed 10 years, and she is the very one who taught me erotics. The speech that she was wont to make, I shall now try to tell you all on the basis of what has been agreed on between Agathon and myself, and I shall try to do it in my own, as best as I can. For just as you explain, Agathon, one must first tell who Eros himself is and what sort he is, and then tell his deeds. In my opinion, it is easiest to do this in just the same way that the stranger once did in quizzing me. For I came pretty near, in speaking to her, to saying the same sort of things that Agathon said to me now, that Eros was a great god and was the love of beautiful things. She then went on to refute me with those same arguments with which I refuted him, that he is neither beautiful, according to my argument, nor good. And I said, How do you mean it, Diotima? Is Eros after all ugly and bad? And she said, Hush. Or do you believe that whatever is not beautiful must necessarily be ugly? Absolutely. And whatever is not wise without understanding? Or were you unaware that there is something in between wisdom and lack of understanding? What is it? Don't you know, she said, that to opine correctly without being able to give an account is neither to know expertly, for how could expert knowledge be an unaccounted for matter? Nor lack of understanding, for how could lack of understanding be that which has hit upon what is? But surely, correct opinion is like that, somewhere between intelligence and lack of understanding. What you say is true, I said. Then do not compel what is not beautiful to be ugly, and what is not good to be bad. So too, since you yourself agree that Eros is not good or beautiful, do not at all believe that he must be ugly and bad, she said, but something between the two of them. And yet, I said, it is agreed on by all that he is a great god. Do you mean by all who do not know, she said, or by those who know? No, by all together. And she said with a laugh, And how, Socrates, could he be agreed to be a great god by those who deny even that he is a god? And who are these? I said. You are one, she said, and I am one. And I said, How can you say this? I said. And she said, It's easy. Tell me, don't you assert that all gods are happy and beautiful? Or would you dare to deny that any one of the gods is happy and beautiful? By Zeus, I would not, I said. But don't you mean by the happy precisely those who possess the good things and the beautiful things? Of course. And do you hold to the agreement that Eros, out of need for the good and beautiful things, desire those very things of which he is in need? Yes, I hold to it. How then could he who is without a share in the beautiful and good things be a god? In no way, it seems. Do you see then, she said, that you too hold that Eros is not a god? How would Eros then be? I said. A mortal? Hardly that. Well, what then? Just as before, she said, between mortal and immortal. That was an excerpt from the Symposium by Plato. Symposium is a text exploring the nature of love, or Eros, through speeches made by men of Athens. So Socrates is invited to a banquet hosted by Agathon, and at this party are Eryximachus, Phaedrus, Pausanias, Agathon, Aristophanes, and at the end, Alcibiades. Each of them are notable Athenian men. Aristophanes, for example, is a famous comic playwright. Agathon is a tragic poet. Eryximachus is a physician. And so at this banquet, they decide that they want to discuss the topic of Eros, or love, instead of getting drunk, as they had done on the previous night. So each person then delivers a speech on Eros, the god of love, offering their perspective on what it is. One quick note here, I'm going to be using love and Eros interchangeably throughout this, so keep that in mind. Now, Phaedrus goes first. So he gives a speech on how Eros inspires noble deeds and acts of courage. And after Phaedrus, each guest provides their own account. Aristophanes, being a comic, provides the case that human beings were once spherical beings, but then the god decided to cut them in half and then turn their heads around. And out of sympathy, eventually turned their genitals downwards and outwards. All this means for Aristophanes is that individual human beings are seeking their ultimate other half. So this is Aristophanes speaking. First of all, the races of human beings were three, not two as now, male and female. For there was also a third race that shared in both, a race whose name still remains, though it itself has vanished. For at the time one race was androgynous, and in looks and name it combined both the male as well as the female. But now it does not exist except for the name that is reserved for reproach. Secondly, the looks of each human being were as a whole round, with back and sides in a circle, and each had 4 arms and legs equal in number to his arms, and 2 faces alike in all respect on a cylindrical neck. But there was one head for both faces. They were set in opposite directions, and 4 ears, and 2 sets of genitals, and all the rest that one might conjecture from this. Eventually, according to Aristophanes, what happens is that these early human race, they rebel against the gods because they were powerful. And what he goes on to say is, then Zeus and the other gods deliberated as to what they should do with them. And they were long perplexed, for the gods knew neither how they could kill them, and, just as they had struck the giants with lightning, obliterate the race. For in that case, their own honor and sacrifices from human beings would vanish, nor how could they allow them to continue to behave licentiously. Then Zeus thought hard and says, in my opinion, he said, I have a device whereby human beings would continue to exist at the same time, having become weaker, would stop their licentiousness. I shall now cut each of them in 2, he said, and they will be both weaker and more useful to us through the increase in their numbers, and they will walk upright on 2 legs. And as soon as he had said this, he began to cut human beings in 2, just like those who cut sorb apples in preparation for pickling, or those who cut eggs with hair. And whenever he cut someone, he had Apollo turn their face and half the neck round to face the cut. So in beholding his own cutting, the human being might be more orderly, and he had him heal all the rest. Aristophanes' mythology is that we were once spherical creatures with 4 arms, 4 legs, single head with 2 faces, right? And eventually, out of our pride, we challenged the gods, and then the gods decided to cut us in half. And once they were split, each half began searching for the other half. And this is what Aristophanes calls love. A human being is not complete until it finds its other half, and only then is there a sense of completeness and unity. And love is the driving force behind this desire. Socrates, and I'm going to be focusing mainly on Socrates' speech, but Socrates doesn't directly address this mythology. But what he does say when he begins his speech is that everybody, including Aristophanes, up until Socrates, has been engaged in rhetorics and particulars about love. And Socrates says he's confused because he thought they were supposed to be talking about love, Eros, and getting to the universal, the most true aspects about love that is beyond particularities. So going into Socrates' speech is more like a speech within a speech. You'll remember from the excerpt I just read, Socrates is recounting his encounter with Diotima. And Diotima is the one who teaches Socrates about love, about Eros. And it's the only time that Socrates ever says he knows something or that he's an expert in something. Famously, you'll remember Socrates says, "I know that I know nothing." But at this banquet, he tells the other guests that the other speeches were inaccurate when they were praising Eros. And he, indeed, has the true account of Eros. And there's something that Phaedrus, who's the first one to give this speech, says right in the beginning that I liked. And Phaedrus says, "Lovers are the only ones who are willing to die for the sake of another." He gives the example of Alcestis, the daughter of Peleus, who was willing to die on behalf of her husband. And this rendered her love, according to Phaedrus, to be greater than the love that her in-laws had for their own son. And he says this is the type of love that is true love. And I think there's some truth in here, in that your willingness to forego your own life, to sacrifice your own life in service of another or to save another, speaks to the depths of the love that you have. And don't take my word for this. Take the words of Jesus. When Jesus says in the Gospel of John, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friend." It's similar to what Phaedrus is saying in that quote that I just mentioned. Because Jesus here is talking about sacrificial love. And it's a sacrificial love of laying down your life for another. That is the greatest sense of love. And Jesus ends up exemplifying this. This to me ties into what Socrates ends up saying is love, which he says is the contemplation of the beautiful. And once you attain and ascend this ladder of love, which we'll get into, I think only then are you able to sacrifice your life, put down your life for another. Because only in having contemplated and ascended and apprehended this sense of love that is universal, only then do you realize that you and the other person, the one that you love, the one that you're going to sacrifice your life for, you're doing it because you realize you're not really different from the other person, that you are them and they are you. But we'll get to that ladder of love in just a bit. It is interesting to note that in Greek there are multiple types of love. In English we mainly use the word love, but in the Greek you have eros, which is love that is characterized by intense sexual desire and romantic attraction. And this is the word that is used in the Symposium, Eros. And then there's pragma. Pragma is the love that sustains long-term relationships based on mutual understanding, tolerance. The word pragmatic is derived from here. And then there's philia. Philia is a platonic love that is shared between friends, comrades, communities. It's free from sexual desire. It's a profound and deep connection that you have with friends. And then there's storge, there's agape. Agape is a selfless universal love for strangers and societies, seeking the good of another without expecting anything in return. And this is what we spoke about in the last episode, of giving out of the fullness of your heart, embodying this pure form of love, which is altruistic in nature. But for us who speak English, there's only one word for love, which is love. So when we say, "I love you" to your brother, or "I love you" to your mother, or "I love you" to your wife or your husband, you use the same word. You don't distinguish between the type of love. But it is interesting that in this text on love, Plato uses eros love, the most powerful or the strongest form of love. And that is, we'll learn why, especially when we're talking about the ascension, the ladder of love, and how that comes to play. And secondly, it's because erotic love, or eros, draws the lover to the beloved in a very strong and forceful manner. And that's why this term is used. So before we get into Socrates' speech, you have to understand the belief that he held about eros, or love, before his contact with Diotima. And Socrates, in the excerpt that we read, mentions that he used to hold to the same opinions as Agathon, which is that Agathon, in his speech, makes the case that love is connected to the good, to the beautiful, to truth, and that indeed love is beautiful and good. But Socrates, through his dialectic, shows Agathon that he really doesn't understand love. And the reason Socrates is able to do this is because Diotima does the same thing to Socrates, which he mentions in the speech. Socrates, as I mentioned, thinks that everybody's speech up until his own has been engaged more so in rhetorics than anything else. And what Socrates wants to do is set out true universal points about love that is unaffected by particulars, by individual situations. So he gets Agathon, through his dialectic, to agree that love is always of something. It's like a father. A father is the father of a son. A mother is the mother of a son or a daughter. So love is of something and not nothing. So I read, "Answer me just a little more," Socrates said, "so that you might come to understand better what I want. Suppose I asked, what about this point? Is a brother, just in terms of what he is, a brother of someone, or isn't he?" He answered that he is. "And of a brother or a sister, right?" He agreed. "Do try then," he said, "to tell about love as well. Is Eros love of nothing or something? Of something he is, of course. Keep this fast in your memory. This something of which you claim he is," Socrates said. "But now say only this much, that Eros, that is the love of something, does he desire this something or not?" "Of course he does," he said. "And is it when he has or does not have that which he desires and loves, that he desires and loves it?" "It is at least likely that he does not have it," he said. "Think," Socrates said, "is it not a necessity, rather than a likelihood, that the desirous thing desires what it is in need of, and does not desire unless it is in need? For in my opinion, Agathon, it is a marvelous necessity. What is your opinion?" "It's my opinion too," he said. "What you say is fair. Would anyone want to be tall if he were tall, or strong if he were strong? From what has been agreed upon, that would be impossible. For he surely would not be in need of those things that he already is. What you say is true. So that if he wanted to be strong, being strong," Socrates said, "and swift, being swift, and healthy, being healthy, I say this so that we may not deceive ourselves. For one might perhaps suppose with regard to these and all cases of this sort, that those who are of this sort and have these things desire those things that they have. But if you have these cases in mind, Agathon, then who would desire each of those things that of necessity he has at the moment when, whether he wants to or not, he has it? For whenever anyone says, 'I am healthy and want to be healthy,' or 'I am wealthy and want to be wealthy,' and 'I desire those very things that I have,' we should tell him, 'You, human being, possessing wealth, health, strength, want to possess them also in the future, since at the present moment at least, whether you want to or not, you have them. Consider then, whenever you say, 'I want the present things,' if you mean anything else than 'I want the things of the present moment to be present also in future time,' would he agree to that?" Aristotle said that Agathon consented. Socrates then said, "To want those things to be safe and present for him in future time is to love that which is not yet at hand and for him, and which he does not have." "Of course," he said. "So he and everyone else who desires what is not at hand desires what is not present, and what he does not have, and what he himself is not, and what he is in need of. It is things like that of which desire and love are, right?" "Of course," he said. Come then, Socrates said, let us draw up an agreement about what has been said. Eros is love, first of all, of some things, and secondly, of whatever things the need for which is present to him. Yes, he said. So he continues and asks Agathon this question. So Eros is in need of and does not have beauty? Of necessity, he said. What about this? That which is in need of beauty and in no way possesses beauty, do you say that is beautiful? Certainly not. Do you still agree then that Eros is beautiful? If this is so. And Agathon said, it's probable, Socrates, that I knew nothing of what I had said. And yet you spoke beautifully, Agathon, he said. But still, tell me about a small point. Are the good things beautiful as well, in your opinion? Yes, in mine. So if Eros is in need of beautiful things and the good things are fair, he would be in need of good things as well? I, Socrates, he said, would not be able to contradict you, so let it be as you said. Not at all, my dear Agathon. It is rather that you are unable to contradict truth, he said, since it is not at all hard to contradict Socrates. What you see here is Socrates pulling Agathon towards seeing that love is not of something you already have, but rather is of something that you don't have. And he's trying to get Agathon to see that love is a desire for the good of the beautiful. But just because something doesn't have the good or the beautiful, it doesn't, we'll find out, mean that it's ugly or it's bad. And this is what Diotima does to Socrates, and for him to come to see what love is truly about. And still more, love, it turns out to be, is of something that you're currently lacking. And it's of something that you desire, that you're erotically pulled towards. Right? This Eros. What Socrates is doing is he's showing Agathon that love is of the beautiful and of the good, which means that it's of something that you don't currently have in this present moment. And if it's something that you don't have, then Socrates says it can't be beautiful and it can't be good because you don't have it. Socrates continues, but this time he says, well, just because something is not beautiful, it doesn't mean that it's ugly. There's something in the middle, halfway between beautiful and ugly, between good and between bad. And further still, he makes the point that if you don't have knowledge, it doesn't mean that you're ignorant. There's something in the middle. This is what he'll call right opinion. This middle is partially lacking, partially having. So Socrates says, this is what love is. Love is in the middle. And from here, he recounts his encounter with Diotima. And she's the one who shows him that Eros, love, cannot be a god, as everybody in this banquet is talking about. Because everybody says, Eros is a god. But Socrates, when he encounters Diotima corrects him and says, look, Eros cannot be a god because Eros is lacking something. Whereas the gods, they're beautiful, they're wise, they're good, and all these other characteristics that they have. But we know that Eros is lacking something. And since Eros is always desiring something that it doesn't have, it means that it cannot be a god because the gods, by definition, have wisdom, are good, are beautiful. Humans, in comparison to the gods, they lack beauty and they lack goodness and they lack wisdom. And what ends up resulting in this is that the gods and the humans are unable to relate to each other because the gods have everything and the humans have nothing. And what they need in the middle is a mediator, something that sits between the mortal realm and the immortal realm to help them communicate with each other. And Diotima says these are the daimons, or the demons. And here the demons are not what we mean by demons today, right? Daimons, here spelled D-A-E-M-O-N-S, in ancient Greek is simply a mediator, the one who sits in between two realms of gods and of humans. So Diotima says, interpreting and ferrying to gods things from human beings and to human beings things from gods, the requests and sacrifices of human beings, the orders and exchanges for sacrifices of gods, for it is in the middle of both and fills up the interval so that the whole itself has been bound together by it. Through this process, all divination and the art of the priests who deal with sacrifices, initiatory rituals, incantations, and every kind of soothsaying and magic, a god does not mingle with a human being, but through this occurs the whole intercourse and conversation of gods with human beings while they are awake and asleep. And he who is wise in things like this is a daimonic man. But he who is wise in anything else concerning either arts or handicrafts is vulgar and low. These daemons are many and of all kinds, and one of them is Eros. So you see from here that Diotima is showing Socrates that love, this Eros, is what sits between the mortal realm and the immortal realm. And it is what ferries messages between the two. Praises from the humans to the gods and orders from the gods to the humans. We're not talking about this in the literal sense. But Diotima is expressing to Socrates that love is on a continuum, right? Sometimes it's closer to the mortal realm, sometimes it's closer to the immortal realm. And she also does this by giving the story of how Eros is born. Eros is born from wealth and poverty, or from resources and lacking. And so wealth or resource is a god and is always abundant. He gets drunk at a banquet and goes and lies down. And poverty, the goddess, I should say, of poverty, because she's always lacking, she sees wealth or resource lying there. And she thinks to herself, if I can only sleep with him and have a child with him, then I will no longer be in lack. I will have everything that I need. So she does and succeeds in sleeping with the god of resource. And through their encounter, Eros is born, right? Eros is the byproduct of a god of resource and goddess of poverty. So Eros, in this case, has wealth, but also at the same time lacks wealth, is also poor. And Diotima here is expressing this continuum, this spectrum that Eros functions. So returning to this idea of the beautiful and the ugly, the good and the bad, and knowledge and ignorance, love or Eros lies in the middle of this. And especially, and most importantly, Diotima teaches that when you have love in the realm of knowledge and of ignorance, you are sitting in what she calls having right opinions. But the most important thing is, if you are fully satisfied and wholly satisfied with only having right opinions, then you are a fool. Because Eros calls you and draws you towards true knowledge, going from true opinion to knowledge itself. And it is this draw from Eros calling you forth. That is when love comes into play. Having a right opinion is not enough. A caveat here is what Diotima and Socrates and Plato through Socrates is showing is knowledge by itself is also not enough. True knowledge ends up molding your character, ends up molding your soul. And that is what differentiates between the wise and the information hoarders. And we'll see this in just a bit when we are looking at the ladder of love. But again, love is a seeker of wisdom. The wise don't seek wisdom because they have it. The wise seek wisdom because they don't have it, and they are in love with wisdom. They are drawn towards wisdom. The ignorant, on the other hand, they don't seek wisdom because they are ignorant. And the fools and those who are not in love with wisdom are happy to have right opinions, which they either where they just randomly stumbled upon it, or somebody who's wise gave them the right opinion, but they themselves don't know how to articulate or defend their position. This is according to Socrates. Because Eros lies between the mortal realm and the immortal realm. And it is that which ferries messages between one and the other. It's on this continuum. What ends up happening to Socrates through Diotima is Diotima initiates Socrates into this new or this true understanding of love. And ultimately, the goal of Plato in writing this is to initiate the reader and initiate the hearers of the story into having a true understanding of love. And this is where the ladder of love comes in. And it describes this ascent towards the ultimate form of love. And the way it starts is it starts with the lowest rung, which is the physical realm. The physical aspects that encapsulates particulars and individual things. And then from here, you proceed towards more and higher universal aspects. This transformation which takes place is how you are initiated into love. And it takes place when you understand deeper and higher truths or universals. So Diotima tells Socrates that the first stage of this ladder, as I just mentioned, starts with understanding physical attraction, right? And he's talking about attraction to physical bodies. The passions, the arousals that you feel when you see a beautiful human being that you're drawn to. Diotima says this is the starting point, right? This is the starting point of Eros. But after this, you must move beyond and towards love of all beautiful bodies, because you realize that there's a commonality, there's a sort of universal shared between all beautiful bodies. But we are still in this realm of the physical. And to ascend from an individual beautiful body to seeing and loving all beautiful bodies. So from this physical plane, to ascend from here, from this plane of existence, you have to cultivate your virtues and practice contemplation, because the next aspect begins to go beyond the physical and towards the soul. And to get to the soul, to go beyond the physical, you need to cultivate virtues, because virtues are what allows you to, say, master your base desires, your passions, your bodily passions, and you have to practice contemplation to ascend into higher forms of universals. And it is only through this that you can move into these next realms and start ascending towards a ladder. And this next realm is the love of beautiful souls. What ends up happening here is Diotima is telling Socrates, look, once you see that there is a universal shared between all beautiful bodies that they participate in, you then can go beyond there and see that there is such a thing as a beautiful soul, right? And you begin to love not just the body, but the virtuous characters, the intellectual aspects of human beings, which she says are the souls. And you start to gain a deep and profound appreciation for them. But the thing is, you have to encounter beautiful souls that is not your own. Right? It is not sufficient to look in the mirror or to contemplate on your own character to ascend upwards. You have to actually to engage beautiful souls through dialogue, through encountering, through serving. You have to see these souls in action, because you are still as a human being in this physical realm. And so to see these immaterial aspects, like the virtues, the intellectual aspects, you have to actually engage physically. And it is through those encounters that you can ascend upwards. But just like we went from an individual body to all beautiful bodies, so you have to go from individual beautiful souls to something that affects communities and cities, or polises here in this case. And these are things that cannot be grasped physically. From here, the ascent is to a more universal truth, namely the beautiful laws and institutions in place. And these are what create a just and good society. And laws and institutions, even though they are abstract, they have an impact on the souls of the citizens, and the souls of the citizens are affected by having good laws and institutions. So if you love beautiful souls, then you must also love the laws and the institutions that end up creating beautiful souls. So what you're seeing is a slow ascent towards more and more universal, higher and higher truths. So you're going from physical to larger physical to individual souls to what affects all good souls, which are laws and institutions. And now you're getting closer and closer to what love truly is. And where we get to from here, from loving laws and institutions, is love for knowledge and wisdom. And this also includes courage. And this level is much higher and more universal than laws and institutions, because the love of wisdom and of knowledge and of courage are what underpins laws and institutions, are what allows laws and institutions to exist, because it is through those who love wisdom, love knowledge, courageous, that are able to create laws and institutions that create or that help form good souls and beautiful souls. And once you're in this realm, right, so imagine this ladder going up and up and up. The final rung of this ladder is the form of beauty. The beautiful, what Diotima ends up explaining as the one that is eternal, the ultimate reality of forms. But to get here, you have to climb your way up the ladder, right? To see that the beautiful is eternal, that which is total unity and oneness, its everlasting loveliness, which is always in bloom, ever existent, it's universal. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the ladder, you have to cultivate virtues and you have to contemplate and live a sort of contemplative life. Because only when you can give your time and your energy into this, can you ascend upwards and see, become united, that you can apprehend this form of beauty, the ultimate reality, the beautiful that is eternal. Only through cultivation of your characters, your courage, your intellect, can you ascend upwards. And an interesting point that Diotima makes is that this universal of the form of the beautiful is universal across all people, which means that it doesn't matter who the devotees are. If you ascend upwards to here, you'll realize that this form of beauty is the same for every single person who can apprehend it. And that is consistent across the wisdom literature that we've been looking at. That once you ascend towards the ultimate reality, what you end up realizing and seeing and apprehending is this ultimate reality is the same for all the devotees who have practiced contemplation and who've practiced virtues, who are desirous of attaining higher truths. When they experience and come into contact with the ultimate reality, they express it in different words, but almost always it's the same idea that they are trying to get at. To learn more on what I mean, check out the episode I did on the Sufi tradition, on Lao Tzu. There are 2 episodes on Lao Tzu, on the Desert Fathers, and on the Bhagavad Gita. Check out all those episodes and you'll know what I'm referring to. And the point that Socrates is making, that all the previous steps on the ladder ultimately participate in the beautiful, in this eternal oneness. But you only realize that once you have gone and stepped onto the top of this ladder. So this is Diotima speaking to Socrates. Now perhaps, Socrates, you too might be initiated into these erotics. But as for the perfect revelations, for which the others are means, if one were to proceed correctly on the way, I do not know if you would be able to be initiated into them. For I shall speak, she said. I shall not falter in my zeal. Do try to follow if you are able. He who is to move correctly in this manner must begin while young to go to beautiful bodies. First of all, if the guide is guiding correctly, he must love one body and there generate beautiful speeches. Then he must realize that the beauty that is in any body whatsoever is related to that in another body. And if he must pursue the beauty of looks, it is great folly not to believe that the beauty of all bodies is one and the same. And with this realization, he must be the lover of all beautiful bodies, and in contempt slacken this erotic intensity for only one body, in the belief that it is petty. After this, he must believe that the beauty in souls is more honorable than that in the body, so that even if someone who is decent in his soul has only a slight youthful charm, the lover must be content with it, and then love and cherish him, and engender and seek such speeches as will make the young better, in order that the lover, on his part, may be compelled to behold the beautiful in pursuits of laws, and to see that all this is akin to itself, so that he may come to believe that the beauty of the body is something trivial. And after these pursuits, he must lead the beloved on to the sciences, so that he himself, the lover, may see the beauty of sciences, and in looking at the beautiful, which is now so vast, no longer be content, like a lackey, with the beauty in one of a boy, of some human being, or of one practice, nor be a sorry sort of slave and petty calculator, but with a permanent turn to the vast open sea of the beautiful, behold it and give birth in ungrudging philosophy to many beautiful and magnificent speeches and thoughts, until, there strengthened and increased, he may discern a single philosophical science, which has as its object the following sort of beauty. Try to pay as close attention as you can, she said. Whoever has been educated up to this point in erotics, beholding successively and correctly the beautiful things, in now going to the perfect end of erotics, shall suddenly glimpse something wonderfully beautiful in its nature. That this thing, Socrates, for whose sake alone all the prior labors were undertaken, something that is, first of all, always being and neither coming to be nor perishing, nor increasing nor passing away, and secondly, not beautiful in one respect and ugly in another, nor at one time so and another time not, either with respect to the beautiful or the ugly, nor here beautiful and there ugly, as being beautiful to some and ugly to others, nor in turn will the beautiful be imagined by him as a kind of face or hands or anything else in which body shares, nor as any speech, nor any signs, and not as being somewhere in something else. For example, in an animal, or in earth, or in heaven, or in anything else. But as it is alone by itself and with itself, always being of a single form, while all other beautiful things that share in it do so in such a way that, while it neither becomes anything more or less, nor is affected at all, the rest do come to be and perish. Beginning from these beautiful things, always proceed up for the sake of that beauty, using these beautiful things here as steps. From one to two, and from two to all beautiful bodies, and from beautiful bodies to beautiful pursuits, and from pursuits to beautiful lessons, and from lessons to end at that lesson, which is the lesson of nothing else than the beautiful itself. And at last to know what is beauty itself. It is at this place in life, in beholding the beautiful itself, my dear Socrates, the Manichaean stranger said, that it is worth living. If, for a human being, it is worth living at any place. As Diotima says, once you glimpse the beautiful, it cannot be compared to gold, it cannot be compared to garments, because the beautiful itself, that glimpsing it is worth living if you're a human being. And in a very real sense, when you attain it and when you apprehend the beautiful, you see that all else is like straw in comparison. Because the beautiful is really the realest, the truest thing that exists, right? That which is. The similarities you can grasp if you've listened to the episode on Tao Te Ching, you'll grasp that Lao Tzu is saying very similar things about the Tao. For example, in the Tao Te Ching, it reads, Tao existed before words and names, before heaven and earth, before the 10,000 things. It is the ultimate father and mother of all limited things. Again, Tao is a whirling emptiness, and yet, when used, it cannot be exhausted. Out of this mysterious well flows everything in existence. Again, Tao is like a bellows, empty but inexhaustible. The more you move it, the more it makes you. The heart of Tao is immortal, because its essence is real and evident in the origins of all things. The name of Tao has survived since the beginning of time. Eternal Tao doesn't do anything, yet it leaves nothing undone. If you abide by it, everything in existence will transform itself. And again, the primal eternal Tao is an unnameable simplicity. Though small, there is nothing under all of heaven that can subjugate it. Tao alone nourishes and fulfills all things. I recommend reading the Tao Te Ching, as I've said before, but you'll see the similarities between Tao Te Ching and what Diotima is speaking about when she's describing the beautiful. And the point that she makes at the end of that is to glimpse the beautiful. It is worth living for. And so many of us live life as if life is meaningless and that you don't have a purpose. But one of the takeaways from here is to ascend upwards towards the beautiful, the ultimate form, the universal, because then will you realize that life is truly meaningful, when you can glimpse, when you can grasp it. Because until you've actually attained it or have apprehended the beautiful, you can wax poetic about love, about Eros, about the beautiful, explain the intricacies of how this ladder of Eros works. But then, until you've actually climbed the ladder, or you're climbing the ladder through your contemplative life, through practicing of your virtues, through practicing self-sacrificial love, you are a bird without wings, speaking about flight, right? As the Sufi master Hassan Shashud says, a mystic who hasn't annihilated the self is a bird without wings. You don't know what you're talking about. You, to use the language in the Symposium, simply have right opinion, and you're totally satisfied with it. But that is a fool's errand. But once you've apprehended the beautiful, you understand that this is eternal, that this beautiful is unchanging, ever present, and consequently, all else in comparison becomes flux. And it is through this you finally attain liberation, or to use a term from the Bhagavad Gita, moksha. You attain moksha from this world of Maya. So love in its highest form moves us to become philosophers, in the true sense of a philosopher, of being lovers of wisdom. Right? This is what the term philosophy means, and I've spoken about this in other episodes. The first part of the word derives from philia, and the second part is sophia, which means wisdom. So a philosopher is a lover of wisdom who is on his ascent upwards towards this ladder, towards glimpsing the beautiful. Hence, a true philosopher becomes one who contemplates on the highest truths and is in turn transformed in their virtues, in their actions, and also their understanding of reality. Right? They see beyond this world, beyond this Maya. Diotima says, and I quote, "And so Eros is necessarily a philosopher. And as a philosopher, he is in between being wise and being without understanding." And that is very important here. A philosopher is not somebody who claims that he has all the wisdom, but neither is a philosopher somebody who is ignorant or has no understanding. He's in between because he is constantly journeying upwards. And this journey requires putting into practice the things that he learns, the philosopher or she learns, in her reading, in her studies. Because what Diotima ends up saying is that we human beings, on some level, want immortality. We want to live forever. And subconsciously, all of us strive towards this, whether that's doing great works of charity, that we can leave a legacy behind, whether that's accumulation of wealth to leave behind for our children and our grandchildren, whether that's building a great company that will outlast you, or of having children. And it is this latter of having children that human beings have historically lived forever. Because in having children, you exist in some small way in your children and in the children that your children have. Right? The birthing of children is a form of immortality. Even though it's different, the only way you can have true immortality would be that you continue to exist forever. But because we are on this journey towards love, it means that in exchange for love, we must die physical deaths. And I quote here, "The mortal nature seeks as far as possible to be forever and immortal. Mortal nature is capable of immortality only in this way, the way of generation." And side note here, generation just means the continuation of the human race. And I continue, "Because it is always leaving behind another that is young to replace the old. For in this way, every mortal thing is preserved, not by being absolutely the same as the divine is, but by the fact that that which is departing and growing old leaves behind another young thing that is as it was. By this device, the mortal shares in immortality, both the body and all the rest." However, the point that Plato makes through Diotima is that if you really want to live forever, if you truly want immortality, then you will put your effort towards birthing your virtues. Right? Instead of focusing on birthing another human being, another child, you'll focus all your energy towards birthing virtues within yourself, within your womb, metaphorical womb. It is then, and only then, do you become immortal like the gods. For it is only your virtue which you can take with you beyond this death. All else are gone. And this is the point that Balthasar Gracian, another episode that we've done, he makes, right? And he emphasizes that it is your virtues that you must cultivate, because it is only that you can take with you. And I quote here from the Symposium, "But there are others who are pregnant in terms of the soul. For these, in fact, are those who in their souls, even more than in their bodies, conceive those things that is appropriate for souls to conceive and bear. And what is appropriate for soul? Prudence and the rest of virtue. It is of these things that all the poets and the craftsmen who are said to be inventive are procreators. And by far the greatest and most beautiful part of prudence is the arranging and ordering of the affairs of cities and households. Its name is moderation and justice." So to truly be immortal, you must become impregnate. You must be pregnant with virtues within yourself. It is only then do you truly become like the gods. The challenge for this week, the first is to continuously seek wisdom, to embrace the philosopher's journey and be in the middle of ignorance and wisdom and knowledge. I'd always be working towards that and implementing the wisdom that you learn into your life and having your virtues affected and your virtues grow. So practically, this is like engaging in reflection and contemplation and study, dialoguing with others, recognizing that love and wisdom are fully intertwined with each other. And it is the pursuit of this that guides us towards a more meaningful existence. For me, I'm very blessed and lucky to have friends who I can discuss and have conversations with around these things. For example, I did a book study on the Symposium with two other friends, Amos and Mike, and I'm very glad that I have friends like them who I can continually have dialogues and discussions with. The second challenge is to practice self-sacrificial love. If there's ever a time to put your life on the line for a just cause, then do that. But until then, make a conscious effort to act selflessly towards others, whether it's a small gesture or making a significant sacrifice. This is a love that seeks no rewards. And finally, for the third challenge, is to establish some form of regular check-ins with friends, because it is easy, especially when lots of people are living in cities, that you tend to forget that there is a community outside of your internet, outside of your emails, and outside of your Zoom chats, right? To actually do check-ins and meet up with people, have coffee with them, have them over for a meal. This human interaction is going to be a form of wealth in the future. And I think it is happening now. People that you can call friends, who you know physically, who you spend time with physically, who come over for meals, who ask you how you're doing. Those are true friendships. And that, I think, in the future is going to be how you measure wealth. And with that, I'll wrap. If you want to support my work, head over to my Substack and Patreon. You can find the link in the description. And thank you to all those who are a paid member on Substack and Patreon. I appreciate you. Your support makes this work possible. I easily spend over 35 hours making every episode, and I love doing it. If you're thinking about supporting me, think of your subscription and becoming a paid member as a vote for a world where wisdom is available to all, so that we can create a better, more loving, more peaceful world. I also understand that not everyone can support me in this manner, and that's okay. I appreciate your presence and your listenership regardless. If you're not ready to become a Patreon on my Substack or on our Patreon, but enjoy my work, share it with others, help spread wisdom in this world. But for those who are seeking to support, upgrading to a paid subscription on Substack or on Patreon is the best way. Thank you. Till next week, peace.